Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight we're slipping into a silk-trimmed nightmare, the kind where you're born into luxury, bathed in rosewater, and immediately become a threat to national stability. Welcome to the Ottoman court, a place where being born royal isn't a blessing, it's a countdown. You won't be thrown in chains. That would be too obvious. Instead, you'll be politely imprisoned in a velvet-lined apartment, fed delicacies by eunuchs who never blink, and watched so closely that even your size are security risks. So before the walls close in and the poetry lessons turn to paranoia, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. But only if slow, claustrophobic collapses in historical detail are your kind of lullaby. Leave a comment with where you're listening from and how long you think you'd last in the royal cage before you started naming the furniture. Now lie back, keep your eyes open just wide enough to see the guards in the corner, and try not to look too ambitious. Let's begin. You're not born into the world the way most children are. There is no screaming, no weeping, no triumphant cheers. There is only silk, everywhere, and silence, so thick it seems rehearsed. You arrive not with a cry, but with a collective breath held just a second too long. It's not awe, it's calculation. You're a prince, and that is the most dangerous thing you could be. Around you, the attendants move carefully. They are dressed well, but not brightly, as if colour itself might offend fate. The midwife checks your lungs with trembling hands. She nods once. You are healthy. Unfortunately, there is no father present. Your mother, one of many concubines, lies still beneath sheets embroidered with the imperial emblem. She is not weeping with joy. She is not smiling. She looks at you the way one looks at a flame, entranced, terrified, already preparing to let go. Someone bows, too slowly. Another whispers your name, then immediately acts like they hadn't. It is not spoken again aloud for weeks. You are not baptized in joy. You are not celebrated with festival or feast. You are noted, logged, and then quietly moved to another room. You are a political development, not a child. Your father, the Sultan, might not even know your name yet. Or perhaps he does, and is already imagining what it will cost to keep you alive, or what it might cost not to. Because here, birth is not a beginning, it's an escalation. You are already part of the problem. From the moment you draw breath, you are monitored, watched, tended to by people who kneel before you but never turn their backs. Eunuchs hover like shadows, their silence louder than any lullaby. When you cry, they respond immediately, not out of affection, but because your volume might carry through the wrong corridors. When you laugh, they smile back cautiously, as if unsure whether joy in your presence is permitted. You are swaddled in linen finer than what most people will ever wear, fed by attendants trained in the science of appeasement, bathed in rosewater and dried with towels hand-stitched in distant provinces you will likely never see. You are offered the world in miniature, carved toys, scrolls, calligraphy brushes, but you are never allowed to grasp the idea that any of it is yours. Even as an infant, your space is controlled. Your playpen is surrounded by guards disguised as furniture. The pillows you rest on have been checked for hidden messages. The women who rock you whisper prayers through smiles that never reach their eyes. Because everyone knows you are not an innocent. You are an heir, and heirs are dangerous. Your world expands slowly, but only to the edge of the courtyard. You are moved to the prince's wing. More space, but not freedom. You begin your education earlier than most children learn to speak. First Quranic verses recited syllable by syllable until your breath matches the rhythm of revelation. Then Arabic script, then Persian poetry, then Ottoman Turkish, the tangled language of power, law, and courtly deception. Each word you learn is another layer of the mask you will wear for the rest of your life. You are praised for being quiet, for being still, for not asking too many questions. Your tutors compliment your discipline, your posture, your diction. They do not speak of curiosity, They speak of control. There are other children, your half-brothers, born of other concubines, but you rarely see them. When you do, it is in choreographed moments, shared prayers, formal lessons, public meals. You are taught to refer to them by title, not affection. You do not hug. You do not whisper. You do not ask where the missing ones have gone. Because they do go missing, quietly, suddenly. At first you think they're ill, then relocated, then reassigned. You ask your nursemaid once, just once, where your brother Mehmed went. She replies, to a safer place. Her face does not change when she says it. She changes the subject immediately after. You learn never to ask again. Instead you read. You memorize. You write poetry that no one reads. You pray 5 times a day, not just because you're told to, but because it gives the illusion of stillness. You sit through daily inspections by your tutors, your attendants, your mother, when she's allowed to see you, and all of them ask the same question, in different ways. Are you behaving? Are you obedient? What they really mean is, are you controllable? Your days are painted in gold. Embroidered robes, silver trays, verses inlaid into the walls in curling script. But beneath that beauty is dread. You learn that the quietest rooms are the most dangerous, that servants who smile too much disappear. That loyalty is measured not in deeds, but in survival. Every year, your birthday's acknowledged, but not celebrated. You are growing older, and older means more dangerous. You've started to notice things. A shift in tone when your name is spoken. A glance held too long. A servant who seems to listen too carefully. Once, a scribe lets slip the word cafes. He doesn't explain it. He flinches as soon as it leaves his mouth and bows himself out of the room like he's fleeing a mistake. You don't ask what it means. You don't have to. You begin to understand that being royal means being observed, measured, preserved. You are not a boy in a palace. You are an heir in a system. And that system does not forget. You are still too young to be locked away. Too young to be seen as a serious threat. But not too young to start learning how to sit still, smile politely, and make yourself less memorable than you actually are. The silence around you has weight now. Not fear exactly. Not yet, but expectation. The kind that presses gently, steadily, from all sides. And somewhere in the back of your mind, the cage is already waiting. You spend your early years in paradise, technically. That's what the guides will one day call it. Topkapi Palace, jewel of Istanbul, a marvel of architecture and empire. Gardens blooming with tulips and citrus trees. Courtyards lined with polished marble and prayer tiles. Fountains whispering ancient poetry in the background. Every detail designed to impress, overwhelm, and silence. It's a palace built for awe. But you're not a visitor, you're a resident, and you learn very quickly that paradise, when observed from the inside, starts to feel a lot like a curated prison. Your mornings begin with ritual, not yours of course. You're far too young for formal obligations, but ritual surrounds you. Eunuchs arrive before sunrise, their movements soft and precise. Bath water is warmed, oils prepared, garments laid out. Today, you wear silk in pale blue. Yesterday was crimson. Tomorrow might be gold. You're dressed like a tiny sultan, but without the authority, the choices, or the ability to say no. Your attendants speak in hushed tones, always hushed, even when laughing, even when reprimanding you gently for wandering too far into the corner of the garden, where the guards can't quite see. You're never truly alone. There's always someone hovering nearby, a nurse, a eunuch, a tutor, whose role mostly consists of observing you and pretending not to take notes. You learn instinctively not to speak too freely. You're a child, yes, but you're also a known quantity. And known quantities are monitored. Education starts early. You're not yet steady on your feet when you're introduced to your first alphabet. Arabic script, delicate and looping, like the calligraphy on the palace walls. Later comes Persian, then Ottoman Turkish, then recitations from the Quran, delivered with seriousness by men in turbans who don't quite look at you, but don't quite look away either. You memorize verses before you understand them, and then you memorize their interpretations. You are taught to speak well, but not too much. You are taught to think deeply, but only within approved parameters. Your reading material is selected carefully. Epics are allowed. Poetry is encouraged, especially if it praises Allah, the Sultan, or preferably both. Tales of heroism are sanitized. Historical accounts are edited. No one hands you a book titled How to Survive a Coup. That knowledge, if it comes at all, comes through glances, through silences, through what's not said after dinner. Your toys are beautiful. Gilded miniature horses, carved ivory animals, a tiny tambourine with gold thread. You have puzzles made from polished stone and painted wooden soldiers you're told not to chip. You're allowed to play so long as it's quiet and tasteful. Your games involve mimicking court ceremonies, rehearsing polite bows, and pretending to hold audiences with your nursemates. One of your favourite toys is a small throne, upholstered, padded, and completely decorative. You sit on it with your legs swinging, trying to look imperial while a tutor corrects your posture. There's a moment when you're 5 or 6 when you ask a question that doesn't land well. Something about where one of your half-brothers has gone. He was here last week, playing with a spinning top in the garden. And now, no one will say his name. The answer you receive is vague and cheerful. He's in another wing now, learning different lessons. You don't ask again. You're young, not stupid. Meals are elegant and ceremonial. You're served little plates of dates, rice, lamb, and sweets. You're only allowed to eat after finishing your recitations. You sit cross-legged on cushions so plump they feel like clouds stuffed with guilt. Adults sit near you, but not with you. They eat after you do, or before, or elsewhere entirely. Your table is a stage and you perform politeness like it's already law. In the gardens you're allowed short walks, always accompanied. The flowers are lovely, the paths shaded by fig trees and humming with bees. You see peacocks once, enormous, self-important creatures with eyes like guards and feathers like royalty. You admire them briefly until you notice how their legs are tethered. You never quite enjoy them again. Other children exist in your orbit. Some are relatives, others are not. You're encouraged to interact cautiously. There are rules. Don't get too close. Don't share too much. Don't say anything your mother wouldn't approve of, even though you haven't seen your mother in 3 days, and when you do, she's escorted and distant. The older you get, the more you realise how little you're allowed to trust. The walls aren't just decorated, they're reinforced. You begin to notice things. The way the latticework screens allow people to listen without being seen. The way the guards change shift every few hours, but never stop watching. The way even your private instructors knock before entering and lower their voices once inside. Privacy is something you hear about in poetry, not something you experience. Occasionally, the Sultan visits. Not always your father. Sometimes your grandfather or an uncle. When he does, it's a performance. You bow, you recite, you answer soft questions about your studies. You say thank you even when the visit is brief and oddly formal, as though you're both auditioning for roles in each other's lives. Sometimes he offers a gift, a robe, a book, a small token. Sometimes he offers only a glance, and that glance is dissected afterward, for meaning you don't yet understand. You begin to notice which attendants are nervous, which tutors hesitate before addressing you, which eunuchs tighten their lips when your name is mentioned in passing. You are praised for being obedient, composed, refined, all things that mean you haven't scared anyone. Yet. And always, behind the learning, the games, the rituals, there is the awareness of something larger. A system, a path, a place you're expected to eventually step into. Though no one will tell you how or when or what you'll have to lose to do it, you know there is power. But also blood. there is wealth, but also silence. The more you learn, the more you're taught to unlearn your instincts. You smile when you're meant to. You sit straight when called upon. You answer wisely. You pretend not to notice that the birds in the palace aviary sing only during the day and fall silent the moment the sun dips behind the marble dome. You are, on paper, thriving, fluent, polite, pious, well-fed, and beautifully dressed. You are everything a young prince should be, except free. There's a family secret no one says out loud, not in the playrooms, not in the lessons, not even in the quiet walks through the gardens where the guards pretend not to listen. But it's there, always, like smoke in your clothes or a bruise beneath silk. The secret is this: in your family, love is optional, loyalty is situational, and succession means murder. You don't learn it all at once. It arrives in pieces, a strange sentence overheard, a gap in the genealogy, a bedtime story that ends too abruptly. You start to wonder why certain names are never spoken again, why the scribes pause before turning to certain pages in the palace archive. One day, during a history lesson, your tutor closes a book a little too quickly. The chapter was about your great-grandfather's coronation. The next time you see that book, the page is gone. Eventually, someone tells you the word, quietly, almost kindly. Fratricide. It sounds clinical, academic. It doesn't feel like something that could apply to your brothers, boys you've barely known, who shared your tutors, your lineage, your fate, but it does. In most royal families, succession is messy. Disputed, bloody, yes, but often unpredictable. In the Ottoman Empire, they improved it, simplified it, turned it into policy. Only one son may inherit the throne. The rest are removed. At first, it wasn't always like this. Early sultans divvied up the empire among sons, allowing each to govern a province, until civil wars broke out like seasonal storms. Brothers fought brothers, cities burned, the dynasty frayed at the seams. So the policy changed, centralized, streamlined. When the sultan dies, one son rules. The others don't. There is no trial, no exile, no polite retirement. There is only the bowstring. You learn that word too. Garrot. A clean kill, relatively speaking. No blood, no screaming. Just pressure, applied with practiced hands. The preferred method for royal executions, because it doesn't stain the floors and doesn't make a scene. Sometimes it's done with a silk cord in keeping with tradition, elegant, ceremonial. Sometimes it's horsehair, if they're in a hurry. This is not something done in secret. It is not whispered shame. It is written into law, the Fatih law, established by Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, and a man who understood that dynasties survive, not through fairness, but through finality. As the official decree puts it, whichever of my sons inherits the sultanate, it is acceptable for him to kill his brothers for the common good. Acceptable. For the common good. You repeat that line in your head for days after you first hear it. Not out of fear, not at first, but out of confusion. You are a child. You've never done anything wrong, but you're also a prince, and that means guilt is hereditary. The official version is simple. Fratricide prevents civil war, and technically it works. The empire grows, the sultan's reign, the cities flourish, and the palace remains quiet, at least on the surface, but even the most polished marble holds echoes. You begin to look at the older courtiers differently. The viziers, the eunuchs, the archivists. You start to notice which ones carry certain scars, which ones speak too fondly of a previous prince, which ones seem to wince at specific anniversaries. Some of them remember things, not all of them want to. And you, little, smiling, princely you begin to understand that your birthday was also a death sentence, not immediate, not guaranteed, but always possible. Every time the Sultan coughs too hard, every time news of a rebellion reaches the capital, every time a comet passes overhead and someone takes it as a sign. You wonder if it's your turn. You hear stories, not officially, but through whispers, about a prince who was strangled in his sleep with a velvet sash, about another who tried to escape by dressing as a servant and was found at the palace gates dead before dawn, about one, no one remembers his name, who fought back. It took 3 men to hold him. He left claw marks on the floor. They've since been scrubbed away. But you hear that they were there once, and still no one talks about it openly. You can ask all you like about poetry, religion, language, even astronomy. But ask what happened to Prince Mustafa, not your brother, the earlier one. The one who was beloved, talented, and executed anyway. And your tutor will suddenly remember an urgent appointment. Ask about Prince Bayezid, and you'll be told, gently, to return to your reading. Even the scribes hesitate before writing down names of those who never ruled. The pages are clean, too clean. One day, you visit the palace archive with a senior eunuch. You're there to see old maps. You've been studying the empire's frontiers, but while he talks about battle lines and borders, your eyes drift to a list, a column of names, your family line. Some are bolded in gold, sultans, others are dim, faint, as if erased and redrawn. You point to one of them and ask, "What happened to this one?" The eunuch smiles, softly. "He served the empire," he says. You don't ask what that means, you already know. Eventually you begin to see your brothers, not as companions, but as variables. You measure their charm, their obedience, their proximity to power. You wonder what they think of you, whether they dream of your death, whether they fear yours. You're too polite to speak of it, but the silence between you thickens with age. One day, one of them avoids your gaze in the corridor, another won't sit near you at dinner. The youngest starts stuttering when he says your name. You used to think that being crown prince was the goal. Now you understand that it's just the final round. The closer you get to the throne, the more isolated you become. You are not climbing, you are outlasting. The empire doesn't pick a successor. It lets the others die first. And you, with your education, your robes, your memorized prayers, and carefully practiced expressions, you realize that one day, when your father dies, you may be led into a room. You will not be told why. You will not be asked to speak. You will simply sit, and someone will stand behind you, and that will be it. Or, if you are very lucky, terrifyingly lucky, it will be someone else. There's a popular misconception about the harem, one that floats through the minds of bored nobles, foreign travellers, and modern readers with a taste for the salacious. They imagine the harem as a velvet dreamland, a forbidden garden overflowing with silk cushions, jewel-toned eyes, and women reclining languidly beneath golden lanterns, waiting for your arrival. They imagine it's paradise. It is not, at least not for you. For you, the harem is a labyrinth, a political apparatus, a minefield in brocade. You don't stroll into it like a conquering hero. You don't wink at passing concubines while fiddling with your sash. You're not James Bond. You're an Ottoman prince, and the harem is a sealed world that you enter with permission, under supervision, and with consequences. First, let's be clear about what the harem is and what it isn't. It's not just a place where women live. It's the private quarters of the imperial household, the inner sanctum of Topkapi Palace. It includes mothers, sisters, daughters, concubines, servants, and eunuchs. Dozens, hundreds. All of them operating under a very strict hierarchy. And if you think that makes it simple, you haven't been paying attention. The women aren't ornaments, they're power brokers. Many of them are foreign-born, brought in as children, and raised within the palace walls, trained in languages, etiquette, politics, and survival. By the time they're old enough to wear the silks and walk the halls with grace, they've also mastered the art of listening through doors, speaking in code, and surviving in a place where affection is a weapon, and jealousy kills more effectively than poison. If you're lucky, you're allowed to observe this world from a distance. If you're unlucky, you're invited into it. but not freely. You don't pick a concubine the way a prince picks fruit. You don't saunter in and make demands. You are assigned. When the timing is right, politically, not biologically, you are paired with a woman chosen by higher authorities, not for your pleasure, but for the potential of producing a son, a legitimate continuation of the dynasty. You don't seduce her. You don't romance her. You are introduced to her like a business transaction. And it is business. The eunuchs orchestrate everything. They're always there, silent, unblinking, everywhere. They're the gatekeepers, the escorts, the watchers. They report on your behaviour, your moods, your body language. If you glance too long at a concubine who wasn't approved, that glance gets noted. If you speak too warmly to your assigned companion, someone writes it down. Too cold, same thing. You are catalogued, evaluated, and judged, not by your desires, but by your usefulness. Because in the harem, romance is not only irrelevant, it's dangerous. Affection suggests loyalty. Loyalty suggests alignment. Alignment means politics. And politics in your position is suicide. You may think, in a weaker moment, that you can find solace here. That one of the women will see past your title, past your role, past the ever-present cloud of suspicion that follows you like a perfume. But she won't. She can't, even if she wants to. Because she too is being watched. Her loyalty isn't to you. It's to the palace, to the hierarchy, to the woman above her in the chain of command. Whether that's the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's favourite consort, or some soft-voiced old woman with 50 years of dirt on everyone. The harem is not a collection of lovers. It's a hierarchy of survivors. Some of the women will be friendly. They'll smile, compliment your poetry, offer you sweet sherbet on hot days. But none of it is real. Not entirely. It's all part of the performance. They have their own alliances, their own spies, their own rivalries. They trade gossip like currency, pass notes behind fans, and know more about the empire's future than many of the men pretending to run it. You are not their escape. You are a variable, one to be handled carefully. You do eventually have your night, your official night. It's arranged weeks in advance, prepared with ceremonial calm. You are bathed, perfumed, and clothed in garments so ornate they feel like armour. You're led through halls you've never walked alone before. And there she is, your chosen concubine. She bows. You bow. You lie beside her, strangers on embroidered sheets, knowing exactly how many people will ask how it went in the morning. It is not romantic. It is not passionate. It is strategic. And you perform it with the same precision you recite your daily verses. Because this is your duty, not your desire. If a child results, congratulations. You've succeeded. Sort of. If it's a girl, there will be polite applause and a brief note in the records. If it's a boy, your life gets infinitely more complicated. You've now created a threat, not to the empire, to yourself. The child will be raised carefully, watched constantly. The concubine will gain rank, more attendants, more eyes on her. You will be praised for your virility, quietly. But behind the scenes, the calculations begin. You are now one step closer to succession, which means you're also one step closer to becoming a target. Again, your visits to the harem do not increase after this. If anything, they become more limited, controlled. You are not encouraged to build emotional attachments. You are not allowed to play favourites. That suggests preference, and preference can lead to alliances, and alliances lead to factions, which is another word for coup. So you remain distant, detached. You learn to nod politely, to speak warmly without warmth. You master the art of showing affection without offering anything personal. The women mirror you. Everyone smiles. Everyone plays their part. And slowly, you begin to realise something. This isn't just a palace of secrets. It's a palace of actors. And the harem is the most sophisticated stage of all. It looks beautiful. It sounds peaceful. It smells like jasmine and rosewater, but it's not a dream. It's a fortress, one that smiles at you while cataloguing your weaknesses, one that invites you in and never fully lets you out. The fantasies were wrong. The harem is not yours. It never was. There's no ceremony when you're moved into the cage, no official declaration, no dramatic clanging of doors or sudden torchlight fade. It happens like everything else in the palace, quietly, decorously, with just enough polish to make it feel like something other than what it is. You're led down a hallway you've never walked before. The marble is still smooth beneath your feet. The air still perfumed with cloves and rosewater, but something about it feels colder, more final. The eunuch ahead of you says nothing. The one behind you hums, barely audibly, as if to reassure himself that this is just another routine transition. Not exile, not imprisonment, just a precaution. They call it the cafes, the cage, but not to your face, not right away. It's described as a special residence, a suite of private quarters for princes of importance. There are rooms here, beautiful ones, velvet-lined divans, carved wooden screens, inlaid tile ceilings that depict constellations you can no longer see with your own eyes. You're given books, a servant to attend your meals, a clock, a Quran in gold leaf. It's all very civilized, very humane, but you cannot leave, not without permission, and permission never comes. At first you don't understand the rules. You think this is temporary, a period of quiet reflection, a step back from politics. You try to treat it like a retreat, a sabbatical of sorts, away from the noise and suspicion of court. You read, you write poetry, you ask for more books, you receive some. Others are denied without explanation. Time begins to stretch, not in days or weeks, in minutes, in silence. The guards outside your doors rotate every few hours, but you stop noticing when. They wear soft shoes. They never speak. When you try, they look straight ahead, as though your voice doesn't reach them. You begin to speak less. The windows are covered in latticework, beautiful geometric designs that catch the light and throw it onto the floor in dazzling patterns. But they don't open. You can't see beyond them. Only glimpses of blue or grey sky, the occasional bird that seems to mock you with its sudden, unearned freedom. Your meals arrive on golden trays carried by quiet hands. Always enough food, always warm, always dull. Rice, lamb, fruit, sweetened sherbet in summer, boiled lentils in winter. You lose interest quickly. You stop tasting them. They become markers of time, not nourishment. Breakfast, noon, evening, day, night. Repeat. You try to keep a routine. Wake, Washington pray. Read. Walk the same 10 steps back and forth across the largest chamber until your heels ache. Write a line of verse, scratch it out. Try again. Watch the dust float through the air and wonder why, if no one ever enters, there is always so much of it. You are technically alive. That's the cruel brilliance of it. No one has killed you. No blood has been spilled. You have not been exiled or tortured. You've been preserved, shelved, like an heirloom that doesn't match the current decor, but might be needed someday, a spare part in the imperial machine. Your companions, if you can call them that, are eunuchs assigned to monitor your condition. They speak little. One of them brings you news from the outside, but only what's approved. A battle here, a tax reform there. Never anything personal. You ask about your brothers. The answer is always the same. They are well. You ask about your mother. She sends prayers. You stop asking eventually. Not because you stop caring, but because the silence that follows the answers is worse. Occasionally, a concubine is brought in. Not for love, not for comfort, for protocol. For the sake of the dynasty, you're allowed to father children. Sons are recorded in the imperial registry. Daughters are tucked into the folds of the harem. You hold them briefly. You don't name them. You rarely see them again. They are not yours. They belong to the system, just like you. You dream of things that don't matter. The smell of pomegranate trees in the garden. The feel of your favourite book's leather cover. The way your brother used to chew the end of his pen when thinking. You hold on to those memories tightly, because the longer you stay here, the more the rest of the world starts to fade. You begin to wonder if you ever really lived in it at all. The days begin to blur. You stop marking them after a while. You stop thinking in days, you think in reigns, in rumours, in shifting patterns of silence. Someone important coughs at court. You're suddenly given new robes. Someone else is executed. Your dinner includes a pastry you haven't seen in years. These are your news reports now. Subtle changes, hints. You become a reader of shadows. You are allowed correspondence, technically. You write letters to officials who never respond. You pen poetry under a name no one remembers. Once you try sending a poem to the Sultan. The reply comes in the form of a visit from your guards, who take away your ink for a week. You learn to wait. You learn to be still. You learn not to be noticed. Some of the other princes didn't. You remember hearing about one, clever, charming, a favourite among the tutors. He played music, wrote long, passionate letters, spoke out of turn. He's not here anymore. You don't know where he went. No one does. His name isn't spoken. His books are gone from the shelves. That's how it works. You're not punished for disobedience. You're erased for being inconvenient. And through it all, there's the knowledge that one day someone might knock on your door. Not to release you, not to kill you, just to tell you that things have changed. The Sultan is dead, or old, or weakened, and now you, the forgotten, the quiet, the invisible, are needed. Or maybe you're not. Maybe the door never opens. You are the Empire's emergency plan, filed neatly away, alive, contained, forgotten until necessary. The cafes is not a prison in the traditional sense. It is cleaner, softer, lovelier, but it is still a cage, and you're still inside it. At first, you think you can manage the silence. It's not so bad, you tell yourself. There are books, there is food, you have your health, you have your thoughts. You can fill the days with discipline, recitations of the Quran, slow readings of Persian poetry, memorization of old sultanic decrees, maybe even a little calligraphy to keep the hands busy. It will be fine. It is not fine. It turns out there's a limit to how many times you can recite a surah before it becomes less a prayer and more of a grim little echo chamber. The words are sacred, yes, comforting even. But after the 100th repetition in a room that never changes, they start to feel like wallpaper, ornate, elegant, and completely uninterested in whether you exist. The concubines you're occasionally allowed to see don't help. They're not companions, they're assignments, soft-spoken, beautiful, and visibly terrified to say the wrong thing. They smile too much, they never ask questions, they agree with everything. When you ask how they are, they always answer with some variation of grateful, even when their hands are trembling or their gaze flickers to the corners of the room. You stop asking, then there are the courtiers, not real ones of course. Those operate somewhere far above you, in rooms with windows and conversations that matter. What you get are the filtered ones, old men who've been around too long to be useful, too clever to be let out, or too unlucky to die. They visit occasionally, they say the right things, they speak in elegant riddles and offer you updates so sanitized they could be boiled and served with rice. They tell you what the weather was like last week in Edirne. They tell you which astrologer is falling out of favour. They mention that a shipment of carpets has been delayed due to a bureaucratic misstep. You're not sure if they're trying to soothe you or simply remind you that the world outside still functions, just without you in it. Eventually you stop listening. You nod, you smile, you murmur polite acknowledgements. You realise they're doing the same. It's all theatre now. Everyone is acting. No one is watching. You try to keep track of time. You really do. For the first year, or what you assume is a year, you mark it carefully. You count meals, you note the subtle changes in the light through the lattice, You memorize the guard rotations, or what you think are guard rotations. But then things begin to blur. You wake up one day, and you don't know if it's morning or evening. You eat rice for what feels like the 4th time in a row, and wonder if the kitchen has changed shifts, or if someone just forgot that variety is a human need. You reach for a book and realize you've read it 3 times. You know how it ends. You know how everything ends. The guards outside your door don't speak. They never did. But now it feels different. They're not guards anymore. They're statues that breathe. You try to remember if they've changed. One of them has a limp now. Or maybe he always had it. Maybe he limped in your dreams. And now you've assigned it to his body out of sheer narrative desperation. You begin to imagine that you're being watched, not by the guards. They're too dull to inspire paranoia. By the walls, by the flowers embroidered into the curtains, by the tiles above your bed, where the blue glaze seems just a little too vibrant. You stare at them for hours. You start to see shapes that weren't there before. A horse, a dragon, a lion wearing a crown. You know they're not real. You also know that you're talking to them. You once laughed at the stories of mad princes. You thought it theatrical, melodramatic, but madness doesn't arrive with a scream or a broken mirror. It drips, slowly. It settles into the seams of your life. It hides behind rituals. You begin talking to yourself. Not constantly, just little things. A muttered question, a whispered reminder, a sarcastic comment no one hears but you. Then one day you laugh, not politely, not performatively, a real laugh, sharp, loud. It bounces off the walls and scares you. You stop, you look around. There's no one there, there never is, but you apologize anyway. You write pages and pages, notes to no one, poetry, lists, dreams you had and can't forget. You invent conversations with people who never existed. You draft fake replies to letters you never received. You hide the papers under your mattress even though no one searches your chambers. Hiding them makes you feel like they matter, like they're secrets, like you matter. You remember a time when you were going to be something, a ruler, a reformer, a name in the lineage. Now you're a footnote waiting to be updated, a name on a ledger, a possibility, shelved for decades like dried fruit in a palace pantry. You begin to forget who you were before the silence set in. Were you kind? Were you clever? Were you angry? Did you believe in anything? You still pray, you still read, you still walk your 10 steps, but it's different now. You don't pace, you drift. The floor creaks in familiar ways. You've counted the tiles so often that you can walk the perimeter blindfolded, which you tried once just to prove you could. The staff changes occasionally. New faces, new voices, younger hands. They speak to you as if you're fragile, reverent, like a relic. You ask them questions you already know the answers to, just to hear someone speak. Sometimes they answer, sometimes they pretend they didn't hear. Your dreams shift. You no longer dream of palaces or thrones. You dream of doors, locked ones, half-open ones, ones with light on the other side. You wake up trying to remember if the door to your chamber creaked differently yesterday. You've forgotten how old you are. The eunuchs won't say. Your hair has greyed, but you only notice when one falls onto the page you're writing. You don't check the mirror anymore. It doesn't tell you anything useful. You are still technically alive, still technically royal, still technically waiting. But waiting for what? That's the trick, isn't it? Eventually, the purpose of the cage isn't to hold you. It's to make you forget there was ever a door. The first thing you hear is that someone's voice cracked during morning prayers. It's meaningless, probably, but it breaks the pattern. Then a eunuch hurries past your chamber without bowing. That never happens. The next morning, your breakfast arrives late, not cold, just delayed, and there's an unfamiliar sweet on the tray. You don't eat it, you don't touch anything, until the guard outside clears his throat and says, not to you, but to the floor, the Sultan is unwell. You say nothing, but you don't sleep that night. Unwell is a generous word. It's also deliberately vague. It could mean a cold, it could mean plague, it could mean he's been dead for 3 days and no one's decided what to do with the information. In the palace, things move fast, but only when they're allowed to. Until then, everything is a delay disguised as protocol. The next morning, a letter is delivered. Not to you, of course, to your eunuch, who reads it, pauses, then folds it and places it beneath a stack of prayer books, as though you didn't see him receive it. You don't ask what it said. He doesn't offer. That's how it works now. The truth travels in glances, in missing footsteps, in changed deserts. The Sultan, your father, or what's left of him, is dying, or dead, or vanished into that ceremonial limbo where monarchs briefly stop existing while the bureaucracy decides which direction the knives are facing. And here you are, still behind the same door, still pacing the same floor, still waiting. But now something is different. You're no longer just a forgotten prince. You're a possible sultan. And the only thing more terrifying than staying in the cage is getting out. The news, when it finally arrives, is almost anticlimactic. A whispered confirmation. The sultan has passed. Just like that. A life. A reign. Decades of rule, swept off the board with 2 polite syllables. You ask nothing. Your hands tremble slightly, but you hide them beneath your robes. You look calm. That's the only safe emotion now. A second whisper follows. Your brothers are being considered. Plural, considered. You nod. You already know what that means. Somewhere, someone is counting sons. Not celebrating them, evaluating them. Deciding which are loyal, which are popular, which are manageable. You know the process. You've studied it, lived in the shadow of it. You just never expected to be one of the names on the shortlist. They don't tell you how many brothers are still alive. You try to remember how many there were. 5, 7. Fewer now, you suspect. Some were older, some were younger. All were dangerous in the eyes of the palace. All potential heirs, all competitors. You were never close to them. That wasn't allowed or wise. Now, if they're still breathing, they're panicking. You begin to receive gifts. Small ones at first, a new robe, a better meal, a sharper quill. Then books, then visitors. Courtiers you haven't seen in years reappear. All smiles and shallow bows, offering blessings and irrelevant updates. One of them asks if you've ever considered military reform. Another praises your father's wisdom in keeping you safe for so long. You thank them, you flatter them, you answer nothing directly. You've seen this play out before, in history. You just never thought you'd be cast in it. Then comes the silence, a heavy, prolonged silence. The kind that doesn't just fill the room, but smothers it. For days, maybe weeks, no one visits. No meals are missed, but no eyes meet yours. You ask your attendant a question, and he pretends not to hear. You speak to the guard, and he blinks slowly, as if calculating the cost of a response. You're in the balance now, weighed, measured, and not yet chosen. You dream of doors, opening, closing, slamming. You dream of rope, of velvet cords, of your brothers' faces half remembered and distorted. You wake up gasping more often than you used to. You pray more, but it feels less like devotion and more like bargaining. Then one morning they arrive, not with fanfare, not even with warning. Just footsteps, 5 of them. Too many for an escort, too few for an execution squad. You sit perfectly still. As the door opens, it creaks. You notice the creak. You wonder if it always creaked or if someone arranged that for dramatic effect. A man enters. He bows. You recognize him vaguely. An official from the court. He says your name. He says a title you've never heard attached to it before. Then he kneels and offers you the seal. That's when you realize it's happened. You're not in the cage anymore, not officially. You're heir, or sultan, or something very close to either. And either way, that means your life is no longer your own. It never was, but now the illusion is gone. They dress you in imperial robes. The fabric itches, not because it's uncomfortable, but because you've worn silk for so long that even luxury feels abrasive when it means something. They walk you through the palace, the same palace, but now the halls are lined with people, bowing, smiling, watching. You don't smile back. You keep your face composed. You don't ask about your brothers. You don't ask who died, who vanished, who was made to vanish. You just walk, step by step, each footfall echoing like a verdict. You've left the cage and entered the throne room. It's larger than you imagined, colder too. The pillars are taller than memory, the ceiling more distant. You are told to sit, so you sit, not on a cushion this time, on a throne, heavy, carved, symbolic. You feel none of it. All you feel is the silence that still lingers in your bones, the weight of velvet, and the knowledge that someone, somewhere, is already planning what to do with you if you fail. Or succeed, because now every breath you take is an act of power, and every eye is watching to see if it should be your last. Congratulations, you win. That's what they don't say as they fasten the imperial sash across your chest, bow their heads to the floor, and chant titles that barely feel like they belong to you. They don't say it, but it's implied. In the silence between syllables, in the stiff posture of the guards who used to watch your door, and now guard your throne. You have emerged from the cage not as a prisoner released, but as a weapon drawn. You are the Sultan now, Padishah, shadow of God on earth, the Caliph, the lawgiver, the empire distilled into a single human body, yours. But there is no celebration. Not really. No parades, no fireworks, no teary-eyed reunions with long-lost family, because your family's gone. The brothers you barely knew, buried, vanished, or executed in swift, efficient silence. A few may have died of illness or misfortune. The rest, they died of inevitability. You don't ask how many. You know better. If there's a list, it's not for you to see. If there are names, they are not to be spoken. You sit on the throne for the first time and realize the seat is colder than you expected. Not just the marble beneath you, but the air around it, as if the position itself is immune to warmth. You shift your weight. You try to appear regal. You remember how sultans are supposed to sit. Not too relaxed, not too tense, with one hand resting on the armrest, like it's an extension of your will. You realize you haven't been taught how to be this, only how to survive long enough to reach it. Your first audience is a blur of robes and rehearsed praise. Courtiers you've never met weep with joy at your ascension. Governors proclaim their loyalty. Foreign ambassadors send meaningless gifts and hollow condolences. You thank them all with the flat, automatic cadence of a man who no longer believes in any word he says. Because how could you? The last time someone praised you, it was followed by 5 years of silence and 2 poisoned cousins. The palace doesn't feel different, but you do. Every door you pass through now feels like a trap. Every servant's bow carries the faintest tremor, of fear, of calculation, or of hope you'll fail. You notice things more. A dagger's hilt glinting a little too brightly, a hand lingering too long on the curtain cord, a footstep that pauses just a second too soon outside your chamber. You are surrounded by people, but lonelier than ever. At least in the cage you knew you were forgotten. Now you're remembered, constantly, obsessively, and always with motive. And then comes the paperwork. Decrees, appointments, border disputes, tax reform. They hand you pages of dense calligraphy each morning and expect your seal by lunch. You stare at the lines and realize you haven't been taught what half of this even means. You know how to recite poetry. You know the history of your ancestors. You can name every surah in the Quran by heart. But governing? That was never part of the curriculum. You were supposed to die before it mattered. So you do what every sultan does when unprepared. You delegate. You promote familiar names. You listen carefully, but trust nothing. You nod to advisors you secretly suspect are sharpening their knives under the council table. You approve executions you barely read. You deny petitions you don't understand. You make decisions not based on wisdom, but on which option seems less likely to get you killed. You wonder if this is what victory looks like. You wonder if it matters. The Valide Sultan, your mother, or the concubine who raised you, or perhaps a clever harem woman elevated to the role, now lives in a higher tower, behind veils and screens, ruling from the shadows. She sends advice written in elegant script. Some of it is helpful. Some of it feels like code. You wonder how much of your survival you owe to her, and how much she expects in return. The court watches everything. Your voice, your walk, your appetite. You are studied like a sacred text. If you eat too little, they whisper about sickness. Too much, and they accuse you of decadence. Laugh once and it's seen as instability. Don't laugh at all and you're feared. You realise there is no correct setting, only settings with different consequences. You are no longer allowed to be a person. You are now a symbol. And symbols are expected to behave. And just when you begin to believe you found a rhythm, a way to operate without unravelling completely, you receive a report. Not from a governor, not from a general, from a eunuch. A whisper, really. One of your nephews has been born. Another whisper, he is healthy, too healthy. You nod. You say thank you. Then you dismiss everyone. And you sit alone with the knowledge that the cycle has reset. That the same imperial logic that once locked you in a cage now demands you decide what to do with a baby who, by no fault of his own, is a threat to your existence. You don't want to. Not really. But you know what happens if you don't. You know what happened to the sultans who hesitated, who showed mercy. They ended up dethroned, or strangled, or buried in unmarked tombs, remembered more for their sentiment than their reign. So you sign the order, you seal it, you feel nothing. Or at least, that's the goal. This is your crown. Not made of gold, but of blood-stained paperwork, ceremonial isolation, and constant vigilance. You are the most powerful man in the empire, and also the most broken. It begins, as so many things do in your reign, with a quiet decision. Not a speech, not a dramatic pronouncement. Just your signature, slow and deliberate, inked onto a document that alters the future for everyone who comes after you. You outlaw fratricide. It sounds noble, progressive, a clean break from the past. You write it in formal language, full of mercy and reason. You claim it is for the stability of the realm, for the protection of royal blood, for the dignity of the dynasty. You say that Ottoman princes should not fear their own brothers, that the throne should not be a throne of corpses. Everyone claps politely when the decree is announced. The scribes record it. Foreign dignitaries nod in admiration. Historians smile at your legacy. But you know the truth. You outlaw fratricide not because you're merciful, but because you are exhausted. Because the blood has soaked so deeply into the foundation of the empire that you can taste it in the drinking water. Because you know what it is to sit alone in a gilded cage, wondering whether tomorrow's breakfast will be your last. You know what it is to sleep with one eye open, one hand curled around a knife, tucked under your pillow, trained by silence and paranoia to see ghosts in every shadow. You do not want your sons to live that way, and so you spare them. Sort of. You don't kill them, you simply lock them away. Not in the same cafes you once knew. No, you improve it, make it more humane. The chambers are larger, the cushions softer. They are permitted books, tutors, music, a select rotation of companions to keep their minds sharp. But they cannot leave, not unless the line of succession demands it. They are not prisoners, you insist. They are protected, safe, removed from the chaos of politics, from the temptation of rebellion. It's for their own good. You even convince yourself of that. On most days. But at night, when the halls are too quiet and the air carries that old familiar chill, you remember the silence of your own cage, the way time folded in on itself, the way trust became a memory. You wonder if your sons, who write you letters in beautiful calligraphy, full of gratitude and pious wishes, hate you a little for it. You would understand if they did. You are not the same man who emerged from the cage. He was brittle, suspicious, barely functional. You've changed, you've built, you've ruled, you've reformed the military, trimmed the fat, disciplined the ranks, streamlined the bureaucracy. You've funded schools, libraries, religious foundations. You've invited scholars and artisans to the palace, encouraged the study of law and science alongside the Quran. You've elevated competent men over flattering ones. When it was within your power, you tried to clean the rot from the bones of the empire. And in doing so, you have become what few sultans ever were. Effective, but not happy. You still don't trust easily. You still test your food. You still memorize the names of new guards and calculate how long it would take to disarm each one. You still wonder if your bath water has been tampered with. You still dream of doors that won't open, and when they do, lead nowhere. The palace feels emptier, even though it's never been more full. There are more people, more officials, more guests, but fewer you recognize. The old faces are mostly gone. Some by your order, others by time. The halls echo now, not with voices, but with your own footsteps. You've moved into a new wing. Bigger, cleaner, isolated. You don't visit your sons. You think about it. You draft the letters, imagine the conversations, but you don't go. Not because you don't love them, but because you do. And seeing their faces, knowing they're living the life you once endured, might undo you. You send gifts instead. Thoughtful ones, books you enjoyed, perfumes, poetry, always signed with a formal title. They respond in kind. You've become efficient at regrets, not the loud, dramatic kind. The slow, quiet ones that drip into the seams of your day. You regret not changing the system sooner. You regret the lies you told yourself about duty. You regret the names you forgot on purpose, men you had executed before they could disappoint you. You regret how often you told yourself it was the only way. Because now that you've lived long enough to make peace, you finally understand what it cost. You stand at the window sometimes and look out at the city. It's thriving. Children run through the alleys. Merchants shout over spices and cloth. The mosques gleam. The fountains murmur. The empire endures. But there's a part of you that still flinches when someone knocks on the door too loudly. You wonder what it would have been like to rule without fear, without blood, without years of silence whispering behind every decision. You wonder if it's possible, if it ever was. You've given the empire peace, real peace, not just the absence of war, but the beginnings of something more lasting. Education, infrastructure, religious tolerance, administrative balance. They'll write your name in the records with respect, maybe even affection. But none of it undoes what was done to make you. You sit in your chamber, dressed in your finest robes, surrounded by the soft clink of astrolabes and the rustle of court documents, and you realize something painfully clear. You are the architect of a gentler world, forged entirely from a life that was anything but. It happens quietly, as most important things in your life have. There's no thunder, no final pronouncement, no dramatic collapse in a courtyard. One morning, you simply do not rise at your usual hour. Your attendants find you still in bed, breathing, but slower than before. Your eyes are half open. You recognize the ceiling. You've been staring at it for years. The physicians arrive within the hour, murmuring in clipped Arabic and Persian, their hands gentle but resigned. They take your pulse, feel your forehead, whisper to each other as though your body is already a memory. You listen to them in silence. You don't bother asking what they think. You already know. This is the beginning of the end. They bring you broth, dates soaked in honey, water laced with herbs you can't taste. You accept it all, more out of courtesy than need. Your appetite is gone. Your body, once draped in brocade and armour and ceremonial silk, now feels like paper under the weight of your blankets. You are wrapped in gold-threaded cloth. not out of comfort, but out of tradition. You are the Sultan. Even your death must be dressed properly. You stay in bed for days, or maybe longer. Time ceases to obey your understanding. Voices drift in and out of your chamber. Court officials, eunuchs, religious advisors, the occasional whispering servant. They never speak to you directly, only near you, as though you're already not quite present. The air is heavy with incense and anticipation. Your mother, or the woman who wore that title, appears veiled, ancient, and quiet. She sits by your bed and recites prayers softly. She doesn't cry. She was never one for sentiment. You think she says goodbye. You're not sure. Her voice is like dust brushing across polished stone. When she leaves, you feel something final pass with her. The room is never empty, but it is always lonely. That's the distinction you've come to understand best in your final days. You are never alone, and yet you are never truly with anyone. Not the eunuchs who arrange your pillows, not the concubines who sit nearby, heads bowed, not the imam who reads from the Quran. They are performing the duties of grief, respectful, beautiful, choreographed, but no one touches you like you're still a person. You try to speak once, just once, to say something, anything. Maybe a prayer, maybe a name, maybe to ask for news of your sons. The words come out as breath, nothing more. The eunuch leans in, pretends to hear, nods respectfully. He leaves the room. You don't try again. Your mind drifts. You revisit the cage, not the literal one, but the one inside you. The years of silence, the games you played with yourself to pass time, the prayers whispered to no one, the books you memorized out of desperation. You think about the first time you saw the throne, how cold it was, how heavy you felt beneath its weight, how everyone told you that being sultan meant being chosen by God, and yet somehow it always felt like a punishment you had simply outlived others to receive. You think of your sons, locked away as you were. You wonder if they hate you for it. You wonder if one of them will sit on this same throne, wrapped in the same robes, speaking the same tired phrases to the same cautious men. You wonder if he will be more merciful, or less. Outside your window, the world continues. You can hear it. Barely. The call to prayer rises from the city like smoke. Distant laughter from the garden below. The soft flutter of fabric as someone adjusts the curtains. You are still in the palace, the center of everything, and yet somehow farther from life than you've ever been. Your breathing slows. You feel it, not with fear, but with a strange, almost absurd sense of relief. You have done everything expected of you, survived the cage, claimed the throne, preserved the empire, written the reforms, buried the threats, locked away the next generation. There is nothing left to prove. The last thing you feel is warmth, not from the room, which is cold, but from the blankets wrapped around you. They smell of jasmine and something older, maybe cedar, maybe thyme. Your slippers are still on. No one dares remove them. You are dressed for state even now. You close your eyes, or maybe they were never fully open. You drift not into sleep, but into something quieter, something final, and then you're gone. The palace responds as it always does, efficiently, beautifully, impersonally. The women wail. The muezzin announces your passing. The court dons mourning black. Your body is washed, perfumed, shrouded. You are buried in a tomb lined with tiles you'll never see, beside men you never trusted. The ceremony is perfect. The eulogies are precise. They call you a reformer, a wise ruler, a just man. No one says you were lonely. No one says you were afraid. No one says you died the way you lived, guarded, draped in silk, and only half remembered. They will carve your name in marble, list your accomplishments, polish your image for future generations. But the truth is quieter. You did not die in battle. You did not die in rebellion. You died in a room full of people trained to never look you in the eye. And that, in the end, was the cost of peace. The cushions have been replaced, the curtains are new, the walls have been scrubbed, the tiles repaired, the old scent of incense carefully covered with something fresh, sandalwood perhaps, or mint. But the space is the same narrow windows, the same latticed light, the same silence that sinks into the bones of the room like mould. The cage has a new occupant. He is young, still thin from childhood, still soft around the face. He enters with wide eyes and cautious steps, holding onto the edge of his robe, like it might anchor him to something real. A eunuch shows him the rooms, the study, the sleeping chamber, the prayer alcove, as if this were a tour of something temporary. The boy says little. He doesn't need to. Everything he needs to understand is already stitched into the silence. He knows why he's here. Not the official reason, of course. That version will be delivered in careful phrases about security, stability, and the sacred burden of royal blood. But he knows the truth in the way no one meets his eyes, the way the door shuts behind him, with ceremonial softness. Not slammed, not locked audibly, just closed, politely, permanently. He is not in trouble. He is not being punished. He is simply in the way. The servants tell him to rest. They bring him food. They speak to him with deference and distance, addressing him as prince with a tone that makes the word feel more like precaution. They tell him that this is a time for study, for prayer, for quiet reflection. They tell him that the Sultan, his father or uncle or cousin, loves him very much, that the empire is strong, that he is safe. He nods, he eats, he sits on the edge of the divan and looks at the door, and he waits, because the cage hasn't gone anywhere. Your reforms, well-meaning, carefully drafted, praised by scholars and diplomats alike, didn't dismantle it. They softened it, reshaped it, gave it curtains and titles and the illusion of freedom, but the structure remains. Because the empire still needs spares. Because power still fears competition. Because dynasties are built on survival, not sentiment. So the boy stays, days pass, then weeks. He reads from the Quran in the morning, memorizes poetry in the afternoon, listens to the court musicians from a distance in the evenings. He begins to count the hours by the footsteps of the guards outside, by the rhythms of prayer, by the fading of light through the stained latticework. At first, he tries to remember which day it is. Eventually, he stops. He writes letters that he's told are delivered. Sometimes, he receives replies, brief, polite, stripped of any warmth that might suggest someone remembers who he is beyond his bloodline. His mother writes once a month. The handwriting changes. Eventually, the letters stop coming. He begins to imagine the palace beyond his rooms, the throne room he's never seen, the faces of officials whose names he's memorized, but never heard spoken aloud. He imagines courtyards filled with people, gardens lit by lanterns, meetings in quiet rooms where his future is discussed without his name being said. He learns to speak softly, even when alone. He catches himself rehearsing lines he might someday say to a council, to a sultan, to a crowd, lines that may never leave his throat. He dreams of doors, of them opening, of what might be on the other side. He dreams of voices calling his name. Sometimes he dreams of walking out. Sometimes he dreams of being dragged. Because the cage doesn't promise death. It promises maybe. Maybe you'll be needed. Maybe you'll be forgotten. Maybe the Sultan will fall ill. Maybe he won't. Maybe you're next. Maybe you're last. Maybe you're nothing at all, and this room, this beautifully adorned, gently guarded, endlessly polite prison, is all there ever was, and all there ever will be. There's no blood here, no screaming, no dramatic scenes. Just a long, slow erosion of certainty. That's the genius of it, the cruelty refined into a system, the mercy that still smells like fear. Because the cage doesn't break people all at once, it peels them, quietly, lovingly, with soft hands and silk pillows and fresh fruit. It erases ambition, not with violence, but with routine. And when a prince finally gives up hope, there is no mark, no scar, just a polite silence and a missing name. The boy ages, slowly. His shoulders broaden, his voice deepens. He writes more, speaks less, watches the door without expecting it to open. He learns that peace in the empire is bought with containment, that security is the absence of options, that the throne is never truly empty. It is only waiting for someone desperate enough to take it, and quiet enough to survive it. And still, the cage remains. No one calls it that, not anymore. The official name is something else now. The prince's quarters, or the inner pavilion, or some phrase designed to make it sound like a privilege rather than a tomb. But everyone knows what it is: the guards, the eunuchs, the concubines, the walls. The empire, for all its reforms, still believes in the value of silence. And so another prince waits, and after him, another, because the cycle doesn't end when the cage is softened. It ends when no one builds it again, and that hasn't happened yet. That's the end of tonight's slow silk-draped descent into the suffocating splendour of imperial confinement, where being born royal meant sleeping with a knife, trusting no one, and waiting decades for a door that might never open. Thanks for enduring this quiet spiral through a life wrapped in gold and lined with silence. If you're still awake, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which part of princely duty would have broken you first. Sleep well.